Hey, Phillip Haumesser here, and today I wanted to demonstrate my sky overlays. This is my skies of the Ozarks. Show you how to replace a sky in Photoshop. Um, these are skies that I've been collecting over a period of about 2 years. I just carry a camera around with me pretty much everywhere I go. And at work, I have a silo I can climb up on top of. So if I see the sky doing something interesting, or there's a nice sunrise, I usually get there before the sun comes up, or a nice sunset, I'll take a picture of it. And so here's just a nice collection. There's 80 of them. I picked these out of about 250. These are my favorite ones. And I want to make these available to you guys. But it's nice to have a decent selection. And one of the reasons you would want to replace the sky is normally unless you're taking a high dynamic range photo where you would be bracketing and then taking multiple photos and blending them together in Photoshop, your sky is going to be overblown and blown out, and it's going to be really dull because it's just going to be white and just not very interesting. And so by replacing the sky, it'll make it a high dynamic range photo. You have a lot of depth in a photo like that. And so I've collected these skies because I don't normally bracket my photos. I just don't have time when I'm out there and I'm shooting hundreds of pictures. I'm doing a client shoot or something. So I just collected these skies so I can just do that in post if I have to. So I'm going to demonstrate that right now. I'm going to go ahead and grab a sky and just drag it and drop it right into Photoshop. I've got a photo here that I want to play around with and add a sky to. It'll when you drop it in, it'll open up in Camera Raw, Adobe Camera Raw. Just click OK. And these are all shot in RAW, all these photos, because I wanted a lot of control over editing them. So I want to be able to pull the exposure up or down, pull the contrast up, and just really be able to edit these. And for whatever reason, when you drop a photo into Photoshop like this, at least mine does this. I don't know if it's a setting I have wrong. It always makes it a smart object. If you see this little icon in the bottom right corner of your layer here, it means it's converted it to a smart object. So to undo that, we can just right click rasterize, and it'll be normal again. So we'll go ahead and turn that off. Now you see what I'm talking about here. I've set the exposure for the horse here and for the landscape and the water, and it looks great here. However, the sky is blown out, and if I remember right, the sky was actually had some nice clouds in there. It was actually a really pretty sky, but it's blown out because you can't expose for both of them unless you're bracketing. Which would be taking several photos and then blending them together. Which if you shoot in RAW, which I do, you can actually pull a lot. It's amazing. You can sometimes actually pull a lot of detail out of the sky in some cases. But I did shoot this in RAW, and in this case, there's just nothing there. The information is not there. So we're going to go ahead and replace this, and I'm actually going to add on to this photo because I want to be able to see a lot of the sky. And so first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to stretch this out. Well, not really stretch it out, just create more room here. I'm going to click canvas size, image canvas size, set the height to something like 30. Click OK. So now we've got more room. Oh, I'm going to make sure I have my layer selected. Now we've got more room to play with here. I'm going to drag this to the bottom. If you hold control while you're dragging that, it'll snap it to the ends. And you can hear my goose out there. It's 5 o'clock in the morning. I just fed them, and so they're having fun out there. They're going to attract some coyotes if they're not careful. I'm going to press W. It's the hotkey for the quick selection key. I'm going to grab the quick selection tool and just select the bottom portion here. And I'm going to click select and mask. And I already have my settings set here. I have my edge detection set to 2 and smooth set to 2. And what I'm going to do here is, you see how it left a lot of this grass and trees. I want to make sure to select all this, so fine tune this. Usually this tool is used for cutting out hair with your subjects, if you're cutting out a subject. But I use this for my cutting out my skies as well, and it works pretty good. So I'm just going to select right on the edge here. Just click and drag. Try to stay right on the edge as much as you can, and select any of that grass that didn't get selected, and we'll select these trees that didn't get selected, and then it'll just really fine tune your selection. Go ahead and click OK. Now that we have it selected there, I'm going to create an adjustment layer. It doesn't matter which one, I just need the layer mask, so I'm just going to grab curves, and now it's created this layer mask on the curves adjustment layer, and you can see it's done a really good job at picking out, at cutting out these weeds or grass and trees. So I'm going to go ahead and invert this mask by pressing Option I, because I'm going to need that inverted anyway eventually. And go ahead and grab my sky here, turn it back on, and just drag this up here, snap it to the corner, and press Option T for the transform tool. We can just snap it over there. Again, if you're pressing Control, you can snap it to the ends and drag it just below the horizon line. Oh, and also I'm going to go a little bit farther than the edge because I'm going to be adding some blur to the sky. When you blur it, it'll also blur the edges and you'll be able to see through it on the edges. We don't want that, so we'll go ahead and stretch it out here a little bit. Press OK. Alright, now we can, if we press and hold Alt and then grab this layer mask and drag it up to the sky layer, it'll copy that and apply it right away. You can see it's cut that out, but it looks really bad. And the reason for that is because the sky behind it, the original sky was really bright and this one's a lot darker, and so it just looks weird. So we're going to match the exposure by brightening this sky. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the sky layer and go to Filter, Camera Raw Filter. And we can just start adjusting this, and you can see there's a lot of control over the dynamic range here with the exposure because it was shot in RAW. So I'm going to pull the exposure up to something like that, bring the contrast up, maybe pull the highlights down a little bit, pull the blacks down a little bit, add a little bit more contrast, pull the clarity up, get some more detail in the sky, the clouds. Oh, excuse me. And set the vibrance up to about 15, because with this being shot in RAW, when you shoot in RAW, it actually desaturates the photo by default a little bit. So if you bump that vibrance up a little bit, you get some of that color back. I always recommend using the vibrance and not the saturation, because if you boost the saturation, it just seems like the colors bleed through. That's my way of explaining it anyway. Go ahead and press OK. Alright, so that's helped quite a bit. You can still see it looks a little bit stranger. So if we click the layer mask, zoom in here a little bit, grab my brush tool by pressing B, make sure you have black selected, which I don't. If you press X, it inverts that. So we'll go ahead and paint onto this mask to blend the two skies together. So I'm blending the blown out sky with my new sky here. Let me see what I'm doing here. I'm just painting a little bit of black on top of that. Just to help blend them together. I want to make sure I didn't go over my sky and see through the new sky. Okay, so that looks a lot better. Now this is where a lot of people stop. They look at that and they say, oh, that looks great, I'm saving it, sharing it with the world, but there's a problem. And I've seen professionals make this problem. I've even made this mistake before and almost didn't catch myself. But when I shot this photo, I shot it with an 85mm 1.4 lens, and I shot it wide open. So the depth of field is very narrow in this photo. The foreground and the background are actually blurred. And I was focused on the horse, and so you can see it's blurred. The water's blurred here in the foreground, and the hillside up there on top, and these trees are also blurred. But the sky is not, and the sky is the farthest point, so it would make sense that the sky is blurred as well. So we want to match the sky with these trees over here. And the way I do that is have my sky layer selected, press Filter, Blur, and go to Lens Blur. I've found that lens blur works the best when blurring out skies. I've seen some people use Gaussian blur, but I don't really care for the look of Gaussian blur with the skies. It just looks strange. I use the lens blur. I'll go ahead and click that. And I have preview turned off on the lens blur, and I don't know if this happens to everybody, but for me, for whatever reason, when I use the lens blur, it really bogs down my computer. And I have a fairly fast computer, so one way I get around that is by turning off preview. I have radius set to 60, blade curvature set to 42 in rotation. So what I usually do is I turn the preview on just long enough to set it where I want it, and then just never change it again. That's just kind of where I am. If I need more blur, I'll just double what I do here. So I go ahead and click OK, and we'll go ahead and apply that. So now the sky is slightly blurred, and it matches the trees really well, and it looks a lot more realistic now. So that's one thing to keep in mind when you're replacing skies. You got to make sure to match the depth of field in your photo, or any kind of overlay. You got to make sure you're matching the depth of field. If you're putting something close to the camera, you'll want to make sure it's blurred to match whatever the lens. If you're shooting with your lens closed down and everything's in focus, then you can leave it unblurred, which is probably how I should have shot this photo. But at any rate, this is that's how you replace sky in Photoshop. If you guys are interested in my sky overlays, again, there's 80 of them. You can hop over to my website at philliphaumesserphotography.com. There'll be a link in the description below. You can head over there and check that out. When you download them, you'll get a zip file, and you just open that up, and the skies will be in there, and you can just use those however you like. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Make sure you guys subscribe so you can see new tutorials as they come out, so you'll be notified as they come out, that is. And I will see you guys in the next video.